First of all, my name is J.D. Roth. I'm moderating this panel. We are all friends. We all know each other pretty well. So there's going to be lots of fun here, I think. If you attended my session yesterday, you know I've been blogging for over 21 years. I've been blogging about personal finance for 12 years. And in that time, I've seen a lot of changes. Back in the day, say 2008, a lot of personal finance writing was about frugality. That was what was in. What's in 2018 is financial independence. Fire's especially hot in the mass media, as you might have noticed. There are articles about Pete and Carl and Leif and Jillian. And if you've read those stories, especially if you've read the comments on those stories, you know that there are a lot of stereotypes and misperceptions about people who have achieved financial independence. A lot of people think the people who've done this are just young men with high salaries and tech careers who retire and, I don't know, eat worms for breakfast or whatever. Today, we're going to talk about what fire looks like in real life. And the reality is, it's not any one thing. A lot of people think that fire is a recent idea. And because I'm a nerd, I like to read about the history of retirement, especially about the history of early retirement. And because of that, I see that financial independence, it's not a new idea. I've got a lot of books from the 1970s and 1980s on early retirement and financial independence. And just the other day, I found a Life magazine article, of all things, from 1957, profiling people who had retired early and achieved financial independence.
Oh, nice.
People also tend to think that fire is just one thing. And the whole point of this panel is fire is not just one thing. It's many things. For each person, it's a different thing. So to share their respective flavors of fire and to talk about your flavors of fire, we have these four panelists. I'll introduce them briefly, and then they will give you a more extensive introduction of themselves. First, we have Jillian Johnsrud from Montana Money Adventures. Jillian grew up under the poverty line. She and her husband have 6 kids. Definitely not a tech bro, young tech bro. And they're entrepreneurs, yet they still find time to travel the country together with their brood, and they go on extended road trips. Next, there's Milo Anderson, or as he's known in real life, Leif Dahleen. He's an anesthesiologist from the Midwest. He is dedicated to his family too. He's also an outdoor enthusiast like Jillian. And he's a very funny fellow. He might not seem like it because he's kind of quiet, just like Carl. And Carl's also a very funny fellow, as you probably know.
Keep it funny inside.
There's my colleague and sometime roommate, Pete Adeney. He's not as funny as the others. You might know him better as Mr. Money Stashes. Mr. Money Mustache. I told you I'm tired. It's going to be a long hour for me. Mr. Money Mustache, rumor has it, he's started a cult. He's passionate about cycling and living lightly on the earth. But what you might not know is yesterday he drove around in an SUV. True story. It's a true story. Finally, our panel contains one dinosaur, and that's Carl Jensen. He's one of the nicest guys on the planet, which is probably why he's extinct. Dinosaur extinct. He's better known as Mr. 1500 from 1500 Days. He lives just down the street from Pete in Colorado. And Carl, I don't think I've ever told you this, but I find your willingness to be open and public about your fitness and your financial stuff. I'm a lurker on your blog. I love it. It's great.
Thank you, JD.
You're welcome. So this is our panel, and we're going to share what we know about financial independence, or they're going to share. I'm going to try to stay out of it. And to start, we're going to have them give more extensive introductions of themselves. And Carl, why don't we start with you?
Oh, why do I have to go first? So it's probably good that I go first, because I think if you can get past my shirt, I'm the most boring one here. Because I think I know JD said the movement went back. You said that Time article is from 1957, correct? Yeah. But I think the movement probably really hit its stride. And I said movement, that's a loaded word. But anyway, the movement really hit its stride with Pete, and that's how I found it. So 2012, I had a bad day at work, and I find Pete. I'm like, wow, here's a guy who's kind of like me. He's a software guy.
Tech bro?
Yeah, he's a tech bro. He likes to build stuff. He likes index funds. So I'm cut from the same mold as Pete, and so I'm pretty boring. The thing I've noticed, though, let's see, I've been at it for 5.5 years, the diversity and how things have changed. For example, we have multiple physicians here and in the audience. This is a great place to have a heart attack if you want to have a medical emergency. This is it.
Please don't.
But one other pretty awesome thing is that diversity and who's in the movement now and what people are doing. I met, I'm sorry. So I met Jamila yesterday, who's an immigrant from Jamaica, who has 3 kids, single mother, and living in New York, and she's going to be financially independent by 40. There's Bianca, who's going to Airbnb a caboose. How many people rent cabooses for income? So I think it's changed a lot, and I think it's good. It's becoming more diverse and better. Not like me, which is a good thing.
Yeah, I find it interesting that this is even an issue because I found, like I stumbled into early retirement just thinking it was the normal thing to do. I thought just sort of like a naive Canadian man. It was my old joke. It's just like you come here, buy whatever you want, and then whatever money is left over, you just do something logical with that, and then you quit your job whenever you can. And it was only like after 6 years of already being retired that I even realized that this was not normal. So I still have imposter syndrome, especially like situations like this. Like, why did everyone get up at 8 o'clock in the morning just to
They
watch?
came for Jillian.
Yeah, that's true. It's not
Clearly.
really, as long as it's, and there's like television cameras and stuff here too. And what we're doing is exceedingly normal, but we're in a culture that is exceedingly abnormal. And I think it's like, that's the way I like to look at it, is that we're just being just a tiny bit less ridiculous than normal. And that's why it works for everybody. That's why you don't have to be a tech bro in order to succeed. You just have to be a little bit more conscious in your spending in order to get way ahead in money in this country. So anyway, that's why my story isn't remarkable. It was just I like to think about individual money decisions and maximize them for fun other than, something else, whatever other people are working on with their money.
All right, yeah, and I am Leif, physician on fire. Much like Pete, I stumbled into financial independence. I was spending what I wanted to spend and felt right spending and growing a family. And when I was 39, I started reading his blog, and that's what turned me on to the concept of financial independence, learned what it was, realized I had it, and then started thinking, okay, I guess I can retire early if I want to, and I didn't know if I wanted to, so I've taken a few years to figure that out. That was 3 years ago. I'll be leaving my anesthesia job next year. I'm a little bit different in that, I was broke at 30, but I had a good income, so it happened naturally. I reached financial independence. I also spend a bit more than I think the rest of the panelists. I play the fat fire angle a little bit, which is the opposite of lean fire, so kind of a bigger budget retirement. Not so much because we're big spenders. We spent like $60-some thousand each year the last couple of years. So we're not, spending 6 figures, although we probably could without violating Pete's shockingly simple math, right? Yes, but I talk about it because I want fire to be more inclusive. A lot of people, they'll read about this concept and they'll be turned off in the first paragraph or two because they can't grasp the idea that they might have to give up some of the luxuries they've become accustomed to. So I just want to get more people turned on to the idea by talking about spending more money and still reaching financial independence, which you can do if you have the income to support it.
Hey, I'm Jillian. I was probably the one that never thought I would retire early. Like that was never my goal because it never seemed possible. Like that didn't seem like a realistic thing. Partly because I assumed I would never earn a lot of money. I had grown up poor and I just thought that would have sounded crazy. Like I would have been the one in the comment section like, you're insane. Like that could never apply to me. Like I want to adopt a lot of kids and I want to travel and I'm not going to make a lot of income. But I knew I wanted more choices. I knew I wanted more freedom. And so just little by little, I made, some would say difficult, I would say creative and fun decisions that bought me more options. So like our original fire date was like 60. If we could hit it by the time we were 60, that would be amazing. And then I was like, oh, wait a minute, like 55? Like, let's not go crazy, but I mean, that could be a thing. And it took us, 13 years, but we hit it when we were 32. And so I try to encourage people, like, we never made 6 figures. We have 6 kids. Like, we lived abroad. We did a lot of things, partly because I never thought it would happen in our 30s. So I was like, we better do this stuff now. But yeah, I'm probably the the panelists that didn't think it would be possible.
So as you can tell, there are really 4 different flavors of fire here, maybe 3.5 if Carl and Pete have them over there. So what we're going to do is I'm going to ask the panelists a few questions. I really want to save a lot of time for your questions, so I'm going to set my watch. Hold on, let's do it. Half hour. Okay. I want to start with Leif. Leif, financial independence has recently become a movement, whatever that means, and media coverage has really intensified. In fact, true story, as I was walking down here this morning, a representative from a major magazine stopped me in the hall, said, hey, we want to have some columnists about financial independence. Can you hook me up with some people? And
Count me in.
all right. I think this is interesting. Why do you think, what's going on? Why has this become so trendy? Why has this caught the zeitgeist?
Because of this guy, partially. People are getting more burned out in their jobs. Certainly in my field, something like over 50%, maybe 54% in one study I saw recently of physicians report at least one symptom of burnout. Our jobs are becoming a bigger part of our lives, and again, consumerism culture is driving so many people to spend in just about every last dime, not save for retirement. And there's just a better way to live. And I think people, they want that freedom, they just don't know how to get it. And I think it's good that we're seeing these articles in the mainstream media, even if it makes 100 people mad and frustrated.
Why does it make people mad?
It doesn't make me mad. But I think there's some jealousy. I think there's some, that could never happen. People just, I don't know.
Anybody have thoughts on
Theory. People, because I was also surprised when I started publishing this stuff, and then everyone was writing in mad, and they're saying why I was either lying or these ideas don't work or wouldn't work for them. But it's kind of like a human nature thing. There's one thing that's called tall poppy syndrome, where if there's a crowd of people and then one person starts doing something differently, there's like a natural tendency, like this is all through different tribes, not just modern humans, that certain people will want to knock that person down in order to make themselves feel better, or in order to not have that person be the leader of the tribe or whatever. So it's like a really dirty thing that's built into us, and you really have to watch yourself not to do it. But in the internet, there's no controls. You'll get the worst of human behavior because it's all anonymous. But I think another factor is people, it's a sign that it's working. If someone reads an article and then they type an angry response, that means you've kind of cracked through that person's shell a little bit, and then they feel like, whoa, you're forcing me to reevaluate how I feel about myself, or about whether I'm living my life correctly. And then they feel judged, and they feel themselves judging themselves. And instead of taking that like an adult, sometimes they have to fight back and say mean stuff to you as the writer. And so I take that as a good compliment. If you get these things, even though I don't want to go out for beers with that person, I'm still because for every one person doing that, there's probably 100 people who are genuinely making some changes and understanding, especially if they see the same story coming in from multiple magazines and newspapers and all these different examples who aren't just me or Carl. Then they're like, oh, wow, I guess maybe I should consider at least a few of these ideas because all these people are benefiting from them.
And Carl, you were recently in the New York Times like a month ago, right?
Yes.
You and Mindy. And so did you read the comments, or did you avoid them?
I never, ever read the comments. I learned that lesson a long time ago.
Yeah. So what kind of criticisms have you encountered regarding the lifestyle?
People criticized so the New York Times did the article, and then a local news outlet came to our house. And the one comment I did read, just because the comment kind of went viral, is, so this news outlet came and they said, I want to film you doing natural things. So we're eating dinner, and we were having salad for dinner, and we had 5 bottles of salad dressing on our table. What was the comment? My lovely wife is here, how can these people retire early when they're buying 5 bottles of salad dressing? So, what was your original question, J.D.?
Well, I'm wondering, what kind of criticisms? Okay.
It gets uglier than that.
Yeah. I know.
It gets much, much, much worse.
I feel like it even gets uglier from within the community. I don't know whether any of you read the Financial Independence subreddit, but man, oh man, they
Yes.
are savage to the bloggers. So.
And some of them are justified, I think, at least a little
Okay.
bit. Like
What
we're
kind?
all, three of us here were high income. Like, I think three of us here probably made at least $100,000, and the doctor a lot more than that. But, so I think that's justified, but you can either make an excuse for why you can't and figure out how you can. So I fully acknowledge I made good money, but I worked very hard for that as well. So.
Jillian, what's your experience been like with the media?
I think whenever people say, well, it can't be done, they tag me on Twitter. And so I get a lot of that, well, you can't do it with kids, you can't do it if you're not a man, you can't do it if you, don't make six figures, and I get those people, so thanks for that. But no, I think I try to come at it from just a really empathetic place. Like, it is hard, and because I never made a high income, you can look at the choices I made and say, either this is right for me and I want to make that choice because it'll give me more options, or you don't have to. Like, I've never said, like, there's one way you have to do this. Like, this is the choices I made because it was worth it. There were things that really, really mattered to me that and it didn't feel like sacrifices. I think when you have enough gratitude and you love life enough, it kind of makes you immune to some of the things that might be perceived as challenges. Like, we lived, so way back in the day, before like van life was cool, I bought like an 80s camper, like a burnt orange camper, but
Do you still have it?
no. I do have a pop-up camper, though, which is less glamorous, actually. We did a 10-week trip in with all 7 of us to national parks this summer, but
And she made me burned pancakes in Portland.
oh my gosh, I burned these so bad. He met all my crazy kids. But yeah, I think, at that point in time, living in a camper was kind of like living in a nice tent. People are like, oh, you live in like a tent. That's an interesting life choice. And I drove like a really beat up Geo Metro, but I had grown up in kind of a difficult family situation. And so all through high school, I'd saved money, like I'd worked like crazy, and I had $8,000. And I bought a camper because it was mine, and I could live there, and like nobody could take it from me, and I was so happy to have this like safe space. And we got married, and we lived our first year of marriage in there, and it was awesome. Like, there was no yard work, there was no maintenance. You cannot fight in a camper for long. You have to make that up quietly because you're also in a camper. Yeah, it was awesome.
So, Jillian, you just briefly alluded to the challenges on the way to early retirement. I wonder if the other three, can you talk about some of the challenges you faced on the path to financial independence?
I wouldn't actually say that was my challenge, though.
Oh, that's
Like, that was
kind of a
easy.
reward.
That was
All right,
the-
fair enough.
that was
fair enough.
the fun
well,
of
talk
it.
about some of the challenges. What are some of the challenges you
Well,
faced?
let the other challenges go first.
All right. fair enough.
Did you have any challenges?
Pete had no challenges.
I don't know if it's a challenge, but I probably did it the wrong way. So I was on this drive to reach this big number, and we flipped houses and we worked very, very hard. So I wasn't enjoying life and living at the moment. And no matter where you are in life, you have to appreciate it and find happiness in your day. And I didn't do enough of that. So what drives me nuts is when I see a comment like, "I can't wait till I'm financially independent. I only have 8,000 more days to go." I'm like, no, you're doing it all wrong. 800 days. You're doing it all wrong. You have to appreciate it every single day, because you're not going to be instantly happier when you leave your job, as I found out.
Yeah, and I think, as far as challenges, there's the challenge of becoming financially independent, which, like Pete said and I said, we sort of stumbled into it, so we didn't have that necessarily. But there's the challenge of deciding if you're ready to move on from your profession, from the thing that's maybe helped define who you are for how many ever years. And so for me, that's something that I've been, struggling, not so much struggling with. I think I'm there. I think I'm good, ready to move on. But if you worked very hard for length of time to become this person, this career type, and leaving that life and maybe losing some of the respect or some of the perks that go along with it, that's not necessarily an easy thing either. So deciding to actually use your FI to RE can be a challenge.
Jillian, are you ready now?
Oh, okay. One quick thing.
Oh, Pete
So
does
I
have a
didn't-
challenge.
Because I mentioned that I was an accidental financial independent, so I didn't have any challenges on the way, but then I learned that you can still have bad days despite being early retired, and you're the same person before and after, so it doesn't solve all your problems, and it's still really like a lifelong journey, and if you do it right, you could be just as happy with a job as long as it was a good job for your entire life, so it's not really about retiring early at all. It's about figuring out what makes you happy as a person. So that's one of the things I probably have to write more and like counsel some of these enthusiastic young people who like find our blogs and then just dig in and then just start doing stuff that makes them unhappy in order to reach this goal that's not going to solve any kind of happiness problem. All that does is free up your, it gives you the option of not having a job, but having no job is not a very fun thing either unless you have something really busy to do with your days. So.
Yeah, one thing that I told Paula Pant that I found that when I reached financial independence, I felt financially naked because I no longer had excuses for being 50 pounds overweight, for playing video games all day. I didn't have excuses anymore. I had to face reality that, no, I could have solved that long ago.
Yeah.
So I think my challenge is sometimes when you grow up when you grow up feeling poor, there's so much shame involved in that. There's so much embarrassment involved in that. And so whenever you have like a little bit of money, you desperately want to like put forward your best foot and like not look poor. I felt like most of my life I was just like, I just don't want to look poor. But it was a hard choice to say, I can look poor and build wealth, or I can just pretend that I'm not poor. But I wasn't going to make enough money to be able to do both. And it was having to be okay driving a beater car, which was hard. And sometimes other people will have those insecurities as well. And so they'll put them on you and they'll shame you. And it was hard when I still was poor. Like now, I only got like $1 million. I don't care. Like whatever. I still drive the same beater car, but like now it ain't no thing. But back in the day, it was hard to say. I had a coworker. Same Honda Civic. It's like 20 years old now, and I used to park it in front of my work building. And she said, "Jillian shouldn't be allowed to park that piece of crap car out there. Look how badly that's going to reflect on us." Because she was so embarrassed by my car, and I was like, oh no, like I'm actually doing okay now. Like I do have money, it's okay. But that would have like devastated me when I still was broke, when I was still trying to get ahead and to build those choices and that option. And I think it's something to some degree we all struggle with. Like we want to fit into a peer group. And so consumerism's really good at saying, here's what you need to fit into that peer group. But it's a choice. You can say I can pay the price to fit in, or I can buy myself more options and more freedom. But that was a hard struggle, and it's only like I've slowly gotten better about it. It still pings me every once in a while though, like it hits me. But having a lot of money really helps.
Yeah.
So I think that's an interesting observation about, I see a lot of stuff online, especially in the financial independence subreddit, about how people feel pressure from their family and friends regarding their pursuit of financial independence and the choices they're making, especially if they're mustachian. And I wonder if you guys can talk about how did your pursuit of financial independence affect your relationships with your friends and family, or did it? And then once you achieved financial independence, has that affected your relationships?
Yeah, I think, and this goes back to the challenges a little bit too, but, challenge of looking the part or fitting in and having a nice car when you can afford it is the expectation from, society, from friends, from family. I still drive a crappy beat-up car too. It's an 06 Chevy, 150,000 miles, and that's fewer miles than our 08 Chrysler Town Country has. It doesn't bother me, doesn't care, but I think you have to choose whether or not you want to fit in, right? If you want to look the part, or if looking the part doesn't really matter much. And it doesn't, you know. You worry about what other people think, and they're busy worrying about what other people think about them, and no one really cares, right? So, yeah, I think there's that. I mean, for me, my family is in healthcare also, and they know there's stress. They know it's a lot of sacrifice, you know, that I make to do the job, work day and night, weekends, holidays, everything else. So yeah, my parents have been very supportive once I told them that I was going to cut back. I work part-time now, and that I would probably be leaving the workforce. And they've been very supportive. So I've been happy about that, because I didn't know how they would react.
You know, that's a super good point that Leif makes, because I think we all have pretty thin shells, pretty thin skin. So like the tiniest comment, or like Jillian mentioned about the car, someone said something bad about a car being parked there. Most people will hear even one thing like that, and they'll use it to change as a basis to like change their whole life out of embarrassment. You know, like, you know, one comment about your car can cause you to like go the next day and lease a brand new one that costs 10 times as much. And it doesn't have to be that way. We tend to be very sensitive, or maybe we were leaning towards something that, you know, that was going to be like, oh, maybe I was going to upgrade my lifestyle, and then the slightest social pressure can cause that. If you get just a tiny bit thicker skin and embrace those comments in a different way and be like, oh, can you believe Bill told me that my car, he doesn't even know, like, I shouldn't even have that car. You know, I'm just going to like skip to entirely biking to work and show him. And you do the opposite, and embrace being a little bit different, because people, if you're confidently different, and you don't want to be a dick about it, you have to be friendly and like joyful. But you know, like I used to bike to work as an engineer, and there were a couple of us that biked to work, and everybody else was on the spectrum from like fancy cars to medium cars to like 6-wheel pretend rancher pickup trucks. And we could have chose to hassle each other, and some people gave me like a little bit of hassle, but I just enjoyed that because I was confident in my decision, and I knew it was good for me. And that goes for all the lifestyle decisions, because the standard, like, you're always going to have peers. If you're anywhere in the US or most other rich countries, you're always going to have peers that are spending all their money, and they kind of want you to do that so that you can validate their choices. So as soon as you don't do that, you're going to feel a little bit of pressure, but it's pretty gentle. I mean, it's not like we're in some war-torn nation where people are going to point their guns at you until you upgrade your car. So you just have to be willing to embrace the difference, and then you're like people love you for it. Your friends will appreciate the fact that you're a little bit different, and the social pressure goes away when you stop putting it on yourself.
Can we say dick? Is that okay?
I'm fine with it.
Cool. All right. Good.
I'm an
That's
R-rated guy.
That's just the guy's name.
They'll, but
Bill
Richard
doesn't
doesn't
like
like
Dick.
it.
Richard.
Yeah, Richard. Yeah, Richard's very abrasive personality.
JD, so one thought I've had about all that, just thinking about this now, is with the whole community aspect, is in the past 5 years, we still have our old friends, but the people we hang out with have kind of evolved, and it helps to be in a town with another very big blogger, lots of like-minded people, but I think it used to be a lot harder to find people like us. It's easy to find the people who like to spend money because they've got a fancy car, but the guy next door to you who's got a 20-year-old Toyota Camry, he could be broken, or he could be the millionaire next door. So, but it's easier than ever now. Mr. Money Mustache forums and Choose FI groups. So I think it was unintentional, but now we just spend more time with people who we've met through this community, and that makes it a lot easier. Less pressure. We play board games on weekends or stuff like that.
So one of the great things about not working in like a really high income industry is all of our friends were broke and they were all poor too. And like Leif said, like that piece of identity, like I have no identity tied to any of the things I did. Like I made a lot of coffee, I sold furniture, I know everything about furniture. So if you have like a construction question, I'm your girl. But like I was like, to walk away from that was super easy. And where one of the challenges that sometimes high income earners have is they think, oh my gosh, if I'm gonna have to go back to work, can I make the same kind of money? Well, I was like barely above the minimum wage. I'm like, yeah, I can make the same kind of money. I'm good. I'll figure it out. So there's some great advantages to that. But even my husband was in the Army, and there's a lot, if you've been on an Army base, there are a lot of new cars. So and I had to get on him a little bit, but like when we had finally saved our first $100,000, I think I was like 23, 24, and people started asking about your car, like, dude, why don't you upgrade your car? Why don't you? And he's like, you can't start telling people we have $100,000. And I was like, you can't just tell people that. So maybe we were like destined to be personal finance bloggers, because from the beginning he was like, no, we've made other choices. And in the Army, it's really funny because like the rank tells you how much people make. So you like walk around with like your income on your clothing. So you're really in the same boat, and it's very obvious how those little choices make big differences, because all of our military friends were driving a brand new car, but they had all of this debt. They were living paycheck to paycheck. And here we were with $100,000, and it was like, no, there is another way. Like, it is possible. And we were living in a house at this point. So like, it was legit, and driving an old car, but like, it wasn't too crazy, so.
For myself, my personal financial philosophy has evolved over the years as I've learned more from everybody on this panel. How have your thoughts, your approach, your philosophy regarding financial independence and early retirement, or money in general, how has it evolved or changed over the years?
So for me, I used to think the whole thing was all about money, and it's kind of in our society, right? You see these Forbes lists of the top 10 billionaires or the billionaire list. So I think we've kind of got it wrong in society because we idolize these people with a lot of money, and that was my initial goal too. I have to get to this huge number, but then I realized that money should just be the starting point. It is not the goal. The goal is to find happiness and to optimize your life for a good, happy life. Money is the facilitator, and it helps you do that, but money is the starting point. It's the beginning and not the end.
And I think the part that's changed for me after I started out similar to Jillian. I grew up in sort of a poor mentality, even though my family probably had a roughly middle-class income. It was super frugal parents, especially dad. So we behaved like semi-poor people. Like kids would always get nothing given to them, and you had to earn your own money and start buying your own clothes starting in high school and pay for your own education. So and then plus the way I was probably wired to begin with is like always wanted to be super efficient about every decision. So that's what got me to early FI, like a lot of savings early, pretty much automatically. But then after living like that for a long time, raising a child and then realizing that we're still going to keep making money for the rest of our lives, and then having a blog that also made things easier. So I started loosening up with money and being like, well, questioning the decisions more. Like the old me would be like, okay, if there's a bus to the airport, even if you have to transfer and it takes 2 hours and it's $8, then you do that instead of taking the $35 shuttle to the airport or whatever.
Or driving the SUV.
Or yeah, borrowing JD's Cadillac.
It's true.
Nice. So I used to do all these decisions based on the money without really thinking about, whether or not I should splurge for the convenience or the luxury of options. So once I realized that there was no chance of ever running out of money, I started doing these fancier things. But then when I added up because of the blog, I kept adding up the annual spending, and it hardly changed, even after like loosening the purse strings a little bit. And so I would still like buy fancy airport transit or whatever else I needed to do, and it felt so luxurious because I was used to nothing. I was used to always having the cheapest option. So I'm really conscious of when I'm doing an upgrade or an upspending. But it turns out if your big habits are right, then like what you're doing with your housing and what vehicles you're choosing to own, for example, those are pretty big decisions. Then the small decisions, you can go as fancy as you want, and it hardly makes any difference. Maybe like $1,000 a year, $2,000 difference in your spending. So that was a nice feeling, because now I feel like I'm Mr. just throwing $100 bills everywhere. And I'm still considered extremely frugal according to the media or the normal people. So that's kind of a win-win, and I would encourage other people who are early on to look at the numbers a bit more closely and let yourself go on some things if you're pretty good at everything else, and that might help you feel more breathing space as you're going through.
Yeah, I could sum my answer to that question up with what he said. reaching financial independence really gave me the permission to spend. I think I was pretty frugal before, and I still am to some extent relatively, but knowing that you've already saved for retirement. Before I was like, well, I shouldn't buy a nice car. I'm saving for retirement. I want to put this money away. I'd rather grow my bank accounts than spend this money. But once you realize you have financial independence, you're looking at like a 3% withdrawal rate, and it's like, okay, I can do these things. So, like, we've been in Florida for 2 weeks. We got here 2 weeks ago today. Went to Disney World with my kids for a week, and then we got on a cruise boat and out of Tampa. I know, right? And we went to Cuba and Key West, and so yeah, we're living it up maybe a little more than I might have chosen to when I was still saving for retirement. But now that I've bought that piece, now I can feel a little more free to buy other things that are enriching our lives. Whether or not Disney World does that, I'm not sure. But I enjoyed it. It was fun. I'm
What
a
about
fan.
Harry Potter?
We did that a couple years ago.
Okay, that
Yeah, it's all good.
I don't know if my money philosophy has changed much. But there again, like, I never thought I would have a lot of money, so I was like, I have to be really happy and enjoy life right now, because if I'm going to postpone happiness and purpose and fulfillment till I hit FI, I'm like, that's going to be most of my life. So, but I think something that has changed is I don't think about money, like, almost ever, which is difficult when I write a personal finance blog, because I don't think about it. Like, it's just kind of background noise. I thought about it way more before. I really thought about our budget and optimizing, and now I'm just like, we're just living life. And I did that. I mean, that was part of my goal, was to not think about money. The idea of retirement, like, I wasn't in it to retire, because I really like doing stuff. And I think the word retirement is associated with not doing stuff or stopping doing stuff. But I wanted to hit FI to do more stuff. I just wanted to do stuff I was really passionate about and stuff I really cared about and stuff I felt like, sometimes when growing up, it's kind of like you just have to pay the bills. Like, we don't care if you're not good at it. We don't care if you hate it. We don't care if it's like doesn't fit your lifestyle. Like, just go to work and make enough money so you have water. And I loved not like being able to like push back that mentality and be like, I just get to do this stuff I think I'm awesome at, the stuff I love, the things that I feel like, man, I was made to do this thing. And anything that I'm like, I don't like, I just will be like, oh, I don't do that. No, I don't do that. Or I just pay someone else to do it. Like, craziness. There are people who actually like to do that stuff I don't like to do.
Or
So,
need
yeah.
to make money.
Yeah.
All right, I have 2 questions left. One's a little bit more in depth, but we won't spend too long on it. And then one's just kind of a light question, and then we'll go to the audience. So the heavier question is, I have an ongoing debate with Jonathan from Choose FI. I argue that I think we are at or near peak fire. And I think that when the next market crash comes, which we all know it's going to come, that we're going to find that a lot of people who think they're FI aren't actually FI. And so what are your thoughts on this? What do you think is going to happen? What do you think, where are we in the movement?
Yeah, I think it might be a little less rah-rah. You might not see as many reports in the media, possibly. But I would argue that a bear market that sinks you from 25 or 28x or 30x down to 15 or 20x, it doesn't make you not FI, because financial independence is based on the 4% rule, which accounts for drops in the market and a poor sequence of returns. That's why it's not the 6% rule of thumb or 8% rule of thumb. So, and I wrote a blog post about, like, does a bear market take away your financial independence? Because I don't think that just one number is the answer, and the day-to-day market fluctuation doesn't take you from FI to not FI to FI to not FI. So I think once you've achieved that, unless we see something we haven't seen in the last 100 years with the markets, just doing an absolute dive bomb, I would say that once you've achieved it, you've achieved it.
Yeah, I'm excited for whenever that next stock market and economic crash happens, because it's been kind of overdue anyway. So, like, right now we're all buying overpriced shares and competing to buy overpriced houses. And really, if you're trying to amass wealth in that way, like either real estate or stocks, it's better to be buying them when they're on sale and cheaper. So I'm going to probably be fired up to write about it some more than I do now, whenever that happens, because I'll be excited again to tell people yeah, now is the time to really be saving. I mean, it's always the time to be saving, but you're getting more for your money. And for those very few, most of the readers aren't already retired and financially independent. So for them, a stock market crash is good, no question about it. If you're 90% of the way to retirement and there's a stock market crash, that's great, because that means the last 10% is going to be purchased at half price. Stock market crashes never last long. They always come right back up. So that's why it's funny that people talk about that as if it's an issue, because whether you're retired or not, a stock market crash always looks like this. And if you zoom out, it looks like this. And then the stock market's still on its way up. So it doesn't affect your retirement at all. It's just a temporary time when the media gets super excited. But as a retired or a saving person, you just keep doing the normal stuff. You're still riding your bike. You're still cooking groceries at home and getting a little bit further ahead each day. And as long as you understand the way the big picture works with retirement, then you don't really care about the economy. You might scale back your spending for a year, or you might choose to do a little bit of freelance work during a year if you retired with just enough money. But that's good, because you were probably going to be doing stuff anyway. As Jillian says, we all like to do stuff. And if you don't, then I can't really relate to you, so you have to find somebody else.
Fair enough. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the fun question. So I was recently a guest on the brand new Fire Below Zero podcast from Wonder Kid Cody Berman. And he asked me an interesting question, so I'm going to ask it to you guys. What do you spend on and get value from that might trigger the haters or surprise your audience? And why do you spend on that? Why do you get value from it?
So I spend a ridiculous amount of money on all things personal development. I love learning. I love growing. It's a big priority. I spend a lot of money there. I spend a lot of money on gifts. I bought $100 of snacks. You all better eat some snacks. I am not taking this home. I booked a 90-minute massage for Monday when I get home, because I'm going to be tired and sore. And I came home from FinCon last year, spent. I'm such an introvert, but I love people so much. And I was I want to be fully present, and I want to do all the things, and I want to have all the conversations. And so I cleared my whole calendar Monday, and I booked a massage so that I can come home, having fully poured everything out I can here. But yeah, so there's a lot of things that people are that is not frugal at all. But then there's some super frugal things, because I love the super frugal things. And they're better sometimes than spending more money. We love going out hiking. We live right by Glacier National Park, and we go out hiking, and we have a lake, and it's just we can have more fun than should be reasonable for $2 in gas. So it's awesome.
I would say the number one kind of big splurge for us is travel. And, I think last year we traveled about 10 or 11 weeks of the year. And that's not counting going to our cabin in Michigan, which we spent half the summer there too. And it's enriching to see the world and show our kids how people live in different places, like the middle of Mexico and Honduras and then places like that. I also spend money on good beer, and Carl probably doesn't want me to say this, but he's also a big fan. And last night, he spent $200 on a room at the hotel here for us. I'm going to spend a little money to chip in towards the room. So that we could host that fun party that kept us all up till midnight.
This is one of my favorite things about the financial independence community is the abundance mindset. I've said this in many places. I just love how everyone is just giving and sharing. It's amazing. So Carl renting the room and then Leif chipping in, and sharing the beer.
Yeah.
And this is a
I don't have any
$50
to
bill,
share.
by the way, an actual, I can verify.
I don't think I've seen one of these in years, but yeah, for me it's about doing things, what Leif said, helping foster the community. If I could do something for my friends, like buy one of the bottles of beer I bought, I'm embarrassed to say this was $36, and yeah, if I would have thought I would have done something like that a decade ago, I never would have believed it. But it's like Pete said before, it's the small things that that don't matter if you control your house and your car. And
So we're not going to mention your car then?
as an experiment in happiness, I bought my after I'd become financially independent, I bought my teenage dream car, which the pursuit of the object is more fun than owning the object that I've learned. So I'm hoping to sell the car in a couple years for what I bought it for. And then the experiment will be over. I'll have it out of my system. But yeah, I bought a $45,000 car. It's a 25-year-old car.
It's Mr. Wolf's car, the Acura NSX. It's from the 90s.
Pulp
which is-
Fiction reference. Good
Yeah,
to
yeah.
see.
So anyway, I actually approve of that purchase too, because I get to at least look at it.
You heard it here first.
And you get to sell it again too, so that's kind of a mustachian hack, is like you just grab it and then put it back on the market for the same
Yeah.
price, because it's a
No,
classic.
no. Supposedly it's worth $60,000 now, $15,000 more than what I bought it for. And I do the work on it myself. No one else.
Yeah.
I hope it's not a car bubble. Pete, what do you spend on that people
So-
might give you crap for, or
Well-
might surprise your readers?
Okay, so there's two answers. The first of all is like I try to think of a world perspective when I'm judging my own spending, so I don't just look at the US. So really I splurge on everything, like every single thing that I buy or do is among the fanciest things in human history. Like there's nothing I'm frugal on at all. It's all high end. But by American standards, the only thing I'm really a little bit spendy on is houses. So like I will never live somewhere where I have to turn like little plastic faucet handles to run my kitchen sink. You know, I'm kind of like a design/house enthusiast, so that's my guilty pleasure, I guess. So I'll always upgrade any house that I live in where everything has to just be like ripped out, and I'll rebuild it myself because I like being a carpenter, but it still has to be like all design magazine style. So I'm a bit of a princess or whatever, like a spoiled. When it comes to that, I'm like, what? I can't have white appliances? Like, I just donate these immediately.
And how many bicycles do you own?
Well, they're for guests, JD, but approximately 7, maybe. And they all got used. I donated my fleet of bikes and my house to visiting guests for the last 2 weeks in Longmont, and so did Carl, actually. So we had like 10 people that we hosted for free. Oh yeah, so the cool thing though is if you get a guilty indulgence like Carl's NSX or my house passion, you can do it in such a way that it doesn't really cost you anything, because I always sell my houses at a profit when I eventually move, or rent them out at a higher rent. So even though I'm getting pleasure from this sort of consumery thing of having the fancy dishwasher and the fancy cabinets and everything, from a money perspective, it's really, I'm still coming out ahead, just not as ahead as if I maybe invested that money in stocks or something.
So
You can't have too many bikes in your life.
Yeah, as long as you have friends. You can have too many bikes if they're all just for you.
Pete was giving me crap because I brought 5 pairs of shoes and he saw them in the closet. So I'm like, how many bikes do you
5? I
have?
only saw 4, actually.
Well, I was wearing one. So we've run longer than I had anticipated here, but let's answer some questions.
Each of you has used the phrase, when I reach financial independence. One, we mentioned 4%, but generally, how do you find it when you kind of really hit that mark?
So the question is, how do you define financial independence? How do you know when you reach the mark?
Nowadays, it's just a simple formula where if you make sure, the first thing is track your annual spending. Most people who aren't very advanced with their money don't even know how much they spend. They just know how much in debt they are or whatever. But if you start adding that up by looking at your credit card statements, you have an annual spending number, and if you multiply that by 25 or 30 if you're being extra conservative, that's the definition, according to like most of us bloggers. of
That
financial-
math is shockingly simple.
Thank you for using my brand. So yeah, if you lived on to make the math simple, if you needed only $10,000 a year to live on, then you'd need times 25. You'd need $250,000 of investments, and that could pretty much generate a passive income, including the dividends and like selling a tiny bit of the shares, and the rest of them would stay in there and go up for a life. So that's the thing I've been pushing out as a writer, because it simplifies the message for a lot of people. They used to think retirement was this big complex thing, you know, like Social Security and pension, and you can't do it until you're 70 no matter what. And really you just have to remember the number 25. Like 25 is all you got to know. And then you get to work saving that money, because most people have 0 times their annual spending saved up. So no point get into the details until you just understand like where you have to go approximately.
Yeah, and you can also, you can approach it from a cash flow standpoint. If you're, more of a passive income investor, holding real estate, collecting rents, if your monthly, income exceeds your monthly spending, then you're also there, assuming that those incomes will be stable.
That's the your money or your life crossover point type thing.
Yeah, that's true.
Another question. Yeah.
Thanks, Scott. We're here from Australia. I'd love to apply a concept. You want to take that back with us in terms of what we're doing. The question to you is there a tension between the financial planning industry, the mainstream sort of planners and FIRE? I'm assuming that's right. And none of these guys
Well,
are CFPs, I'm assuming.
that's an interesting question. The question is there a tension between the mainstream financial planning community and the financial independence movement? Paula Pant, you should talk to Paula Pant and ask her about Susie Orman. Go ahead, panel. Listen to her podcast on Monday. Listen to Paula's podcast on Monday. You'll find an answer.
There is a tension, right? Have you ever seen this? It's quite funny, actually, because they laugh at us for being these like ragtag, super crazy people, because financial planners have been in it and they think they know everything, so they're like sitting down in their suits and like they're used to a certain type of client, and we are not their type of client. So most people they would never consider reducing their spending, because to them, they use the word standard of living or something like that. Quality of life is equal to spending for them. So financial planners are always about like going for the maximum amount that you can spend in retirement. So that's why they come up with bigger numbers for savings. And you can never be safe enough, so you got to just get at least $10 million so you can spend at least $250,000 a year. Otherwise, your life will suck. And that's the big tension.
I think it depends. I think, that there are, hundreds of thousands of financial planners, and some are the ones he's talking about, and some are good. And so, I teach people how to DIY. Right? I teach people how to invest themselves, but some people don't want to learn and don't want to take the time. And I would rather have someone go to, let's say, a fee-only, hourly rate, flat rate financial advisor that's going to give them good advice, that believes in index funds and tax efficiency and all these things. There are people that do know that and do make a living giving that advice. So I like to see people do it themselves, but a lot of people I speak with and write for are very, very busy and just don't have the interest or the time, or are not going to take the time to do it themselves. So I think there is a place. I don't think there's necessarily a tension between all of them and all of us. So, but
So I think Michael Kitsis does a good job of bridging
Yes,
the gap
exactly,
between
yeah.
financial advisors
He's
and
great.
Financial independence. I have some good news. Apparently, there is no other session in here at 9. I was like, oh my gosh, we got to get out of here. So we can keep answering questions. If you need to go someplace else, go ahead. But, So Miriam wants to know, what is the catalyst for making you want to get out of the 9-to-5 and pursue financial independence and get out of there?
Yeah, I'll take that one first. I had a very bad day at work, and it was at that time that I think I was 37, and I'm like, I can't do this. My job is going to kill me if I stay at it for the next couple decades, because it was just that stressful. And the interesting thing was I had deep financial security from parents who mismanaged money growing up. So I used to have, when I worked, would have nightmares that I lost my job. So the insecurity was kind of good because it caused me to work very hard and to save money and do all that. But a couple months ago, I woke up. So I used to have these nightmares that I had lost my job. I'd been fired. I'd wake up in a cold sweat. A couple months ago, I had a nightmare that I was back in the cube at work. So I'm like, winning! So I'm thankful. I never considered this life. I had never known about it before I discovered Mr. Money Mustache, but I'm so thankful I did, and I really appreciate life now.
You're the best marketing department I've ever had. I really appreciate. Oh yeah. Wish I'd brought my wallet.
Jillian?
So I didn't have a catalyst, because I guess you could say I did. My catalyst was as soon as I got a job that paid more than minimum wage, because I had a lot of minimum wage jobs. And even then I was into saving, but once I got kind of like a student engineer job, it's called a co-op or an internship, and I was getting paid $500 a week, I realized like, whoa, this is a lot of money. There's gonna be some serious surplus going on. And then when I graduated, and then I had a job that was like way more than that, it just started building up. Like I started wanting to make use of this money. So the job was never bad. I never had a desire in particular, like this job needs to go. It's just that I thought like, well, would I do this job for free if I have enough money to not need the paycheck? And that answer was always no for software engineering jobs for me. And like it was a good job, but not good enough to just sit there unpaid. So I quit in that sense, because no sense doing a job that you don't need the money for. And then now I do lots of work, but I do it all stuff that I would be willing to do for free. And then a lot of it is free, and then some stuff makes money, but I try not to let myself fall into the trap of saying, look, I'm gonna do the paid work, because then I'm gonna probably make the wrong decisions for what makes me happy.
Yeah, for me, it was studying for a board exam, a recertification that we were told we'd have to do every 10 years, and I was in my late 30s and spending all this time at the library studying things that didn't really apply very well to the job I do day to day. And my family's off doing fun things, and I'm spending my day at the library intermittently reading his posts, because I'm thinking about, like, do I have to do this again in 10 years? And, like, I don't want to study for another test in 10 years. I'm done taking tests, right? And then I read a bunch of his stuff. I was like, wow, I do not have to take this test again in 10 years. I can be doing the fun stuff with my family right now. And so I started going down that path.
Thanks for
Yes.
being part of my marketing department as well. I owe you both.
So we had slowly been kind of growing our passive income. My husband had a small military pension, and we had rental properties, and we had so we had been fostering a sibling group of 3, and the state had asked us to adopt, and we were so excited. And we went away for the weekend, and we talked like, oh, we looked at our numbers, because I'm geeky, and so we do like life planning and financial planning when we go away for weekends. And I was like, yeah, I think we'll be good in like 5 or 6 years. And it had been, adding 3 kids to your family is insane and really hard. But we came home from that weekend and found out I was pregnant, and I was like, honey, we are re-talking that conversation. Because like my head is barely above water with these 4 little children in my home. I cannot add a baby to this. So I know you love your job, but we're taking a break. And at that point, thankfully, we did have enough. We have a mix of a pension, rentals, and investments, and 2 out of the 3, so if one like disappears, 2 out of the 3 were enough to cover all of our bills, which is kind of how we set our FI. Like, if all of our bills are covered, what do we want to do? And I knew at least for that year, it was not a 50-hour-a-week job. Like, we needed a break, and we had taken a couple mini retirements before, and so that's kind of what I dubbed this one. Like, it was just a 1-year experiment. Maybe we'd go back to work, maybe we wouldn't, but we had the choice to do whatever we felt like was the right choice for us.
Cool. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Can you talk about strategies for talking to a spouse that isn't on board with this concept? and maybe your own relationship with your spouse. Maybe it was easy for you, but difficult stories of success with spouse.
So the question is, talk about discussing getting your partner on board with the concept of financial independence if they're not sold on it.
It might be easier just to go ahead and get a new partner. Just kidding. That's a very difficult question.
I would say, my wife stayed home to raise our kids, and so she would love more help. So she's happy about that in that regard. And but also, I think if you have someone who's really not on board, don't talk about the money, don't talk about the dollars, and don't talk about how this is how much we need to set aside. Talk about what you could do, what are your dreams, where do you want to travel, what does your ideal life look like. Talk more about your collective dreams and goals and aspirations, and then how financial independence can help facilitate those.
Yeah, I feel like you could almost turn it around. You ask them what their goals and dreams are, and then you say, how do we get there?
That seems to be like what I've seen a lot of people succeed. So we never had that issue back in our early days, in the married days of trying to figure out financial independence. Like we were kind of aligned on that, but other people have a lot more conflict. And I'm reading this book right now that's related to the documentary that you've probably heard of as well, the Playing with Fire documentary by Scott Rickens and Travis Shakespeare. So anyway, they also wrote a book to go with this documentary. So I was reading it on the plane over here, and Scott and his wife Taylor had lots of conflicts because they were originally living like a Southern California sort of beach style lifestyle with like high-end careers and fancy cars and everything. So they were earning a ton but spending pretty much all of it. And according to Scott, Taylor was happy with that until they had a baby, and then they realized together that they could choose time with their child or choose to keep going with this lifestyle. So a lot of times having kids is the catalyst for being willing to spend less on luxury lifestyle stuff, because it's a direct trade-off for being able to spend time with your kids. So if you're in a couplehood, a couple that doesn't have children involved, then you'd have to do the same type of strategy, but it would have to be more like freedom and time off. And if your spouse doesn't even want time off, then you're probably not going to have any success in persuading him or her from whatever they're already in. And then you go back to Carl's suggestion of finding a new partner.
Other questions? Yes.
So I've heard a couple of you talk about be happy now, don't wait for financial independence. But if you had the choice between working a high-paying job that you didn't like and you knew was going to kill you, so that you could get there faster, or say a job that paid half that you wouldn't be miserable in, but it'd take you much longer.
So this is an interesting question. And it relates to something that I was going to ask too. It's essentially, how do you find balance between today and tomorrow? So you're asking if you had a choice between a high-paying job that's going to get you to financial independence quickly, but you hate the job, or you could have a job that you like, but it's going to take forever to get there. How do you make that choice? And I would say, how do you find balance basically between today and tomorrow?
It's a really common, challenge. And the first question I would ask is, once you hit financial independence, what do you want your life to look like? What are you actually looking for? Because a lot of people are just burned out. They're just tired. They like their work, they like their life, but right now they need a nap. So in that sense, you might just need to take a break. Like you might just need to get some time off, and then you can come back. If you want to work in retirement, after your FI, if you want to do things, I would start making progress on doing the things that you want to do. Start laying that foundation. And once you have a little bit of runway, and once you have a little bit of success with it, you have financial runway, and you've tested an idea, I'm kind of a proponent of jumping early, because like we've talked about, retiring doesn't magically fix your life. Like that's entirely up to you, and it's a long journey of figuring out what does make me happy and fulfilled and add meaning to my life. So I would start asking those questions, because that might let you know, like, should I push through for a couple of years, or is it time to make a switch?
And it may be a bit of a false dichotomy, because, the high-paying job sounds good, but maybe you can make it a better job, or maybe you can find a similar high-paying job that doesn't make you as miserable. Maybe it's just the people that you work with, the particular boss, the hours or expectations that are unreasonable. Maybe you can say, hey, can we do this differently? Or go look for something similar with better people, So you may be able to make the high salary and have a more tolerable job, if not a good job. So I wouldn't say, well, this one makes me miserable, so I'm going to make a lot less. You might be able to find a happy balance even at that higher income level.
I just wanted to add a side thanks to JD for making this session super fun, because all of us just woke up kind of hungover and stumbled down here, and we're like, is that really going to be any good session? Like, or are we just going to be sitting blank-faced at the front of the room? And thanks for making it.
Thank you guys for talking, because I'm a zombie and having a bad hair day. Thank you, everybody. feel free to assault them here on the stage.
Can you rephrase that?